Can we start?
Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege for me to welcome you all to the fifth day of the International Webinar on Vulnerabilities and Human Rights, organized by the Department of Human Rights and Human Development in association with the Department of Disability Studies, Rabindra Bharati University. Before we begin today's session, let me introduce myself. I am Pubali Bhattacharya, postgraduate student at Rabindra Bharati University, Department of Human Rights and Human Development. Now, I would request Dr. Payal Roy Chaudhary Dutt Ma'am, Head of the Department to the Department of Human Rights and Human Development, Rabindra Bharati University, to formally give the welcome speech to Ms. Rachana Mudraboya, Human Rights Law Network, New Delhi, India, and to Dr. Bashavi Chakraborty, Senior Faculty Member in Sociology, Rabindra Bharati University, to start today's program. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Pubali, and thanks especially to the tech team today, Victoria, Taruk, Parveen, whoever is there, to brave this out today in this Bandh day and to be there and hold on the show. Thanks, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening once again to wherever you
Ma'am,
are.
kindly
And
switch off your camera and mic. You are not audible yet.
Am I audible now? My
Yes.
camera is, I think something in the browser is blocking it. One moment, I'll check. I'll just check. Link once again on the email. I think I can be online right away then, because this is through the phone.
Ma'am, sorry. Ma'am, you are both mute and your camera is off. You are also mute right now. Payal ma'am, you are both mute and your camera is on. Please turn your camera on and switch on your mic.
So can I be heard now and can I be seen?
Yes, ma'am, you are both seen and heard.
Okay, wonderful. I'm extremely sorry for the technical glitch. It goes to show how well adept we are with the newer versions of technology. So double thanks to the team there for carrying forward this show even today. This being a day of difficulty with regard to communication. So thanks to everyone. Well, like I was saying, a very warm good morning and good afternoon and good evening. Now, we have seen in the course of this virtual conference that vulnerable groups and human rights has perhaps very many dimensions. And day 1, 2, and 3, and 4 was spent looking at it through the lens of gender, through the lens of children, the lens of those with disabilities, And yesterday, of course, we had very interesting discussions with regard to senior citizens and the elderly. On day 4, we really continue to explore vulnerability. And we have witnessed how the world has quickly pivoted when faced with this pandemic. But there are still too many people whose sad story of neglect and isolation is perhaps exacerbated this time around, like it was never before. Now, we have with us to discuss these issues, especially when facing environments where there is no easy escape, environments which are already compromised with regard to prejudices and sort of an animosity with regard to the near and dear ones, and already occurring disabilities and health compromises. There is one group of persons, those who are gender diverse, who really warrant special attention. And today we have amongst us two very eminent resource persons in this area. One, a long time activist, and the other, a long time academic who has really taken forward this discussion with regard to the LGBTQI issues. Now, here I would like to mention really the fact that the first of our resource persons today, Ms. Rachna, is one who has been for a very long time not only very active at the national level and also spread the word, but she's also started the first YouTube channel on the LGBTQI issues, the trans vision. And this is one channel which is perhaps content edited, written, delivered by the community itself. So it's always great to find information directly. So this is perhaps one important resource that we have with us today, and we are very, very happy to welcome Ms. Rachna, who's Hyderabad and based in Hyderabad and a trans activist for a very long time now. So thank you for accepting this invitation from us and to be part of our discussion today. I also extend a very warm welcome to the resource person who has been known to me for years now, Professor Bashubi Chakraborty, former head of the Department of Sociology at Rabindra Bharat University for over 12 years, a very, very eminent and active person who is seen in the academic circles of many a university besides RBU, such as the Presidency, Calcutta University, Kullan University, NSOU, the NILD, and so on and so forth. What is also there about her, which I would like to point out here, is the fact that she has gone beyond her discipline of sociology and contributed very, very enormously to the areas of women's studies, human rights, disability studies, and so on. And when she's not teaching, she is a poet. So welcome you, madam, very, very warmly on behalf of the Department of Human Rights, and thank you for finding time to do this for us today. Thank you, Ashwini. I would also like to extend a very warm welcome to Professor Shorbori Sen, who will be chairing the subsequent session. Professor Sen, of course, has had a fiery career in NILD, the National Institute of Locomotor Disabilities, and she has been as capable an administrator as she is an academic, delving equally into teaching and training, research, and fieldwork on equal grounds. Professor Sen has also been instrumental in bringing across gender equity with regard to the working, the functioning, as well as into the areas of teaching and academic courses at NILD. So thank you very much, Shorbori, for agreeing to be with us. Thank you so much. I extend another warm welcome to the very interesting papers, and I welcome all the paper presenters for today, all the panelists, and we have really enriched ever since we began this webinar, and we stand to be further enriched with your learned discourses. So thank you for coming and thank you for presenting today throughout the day. I welcome everyone, all of our viewers who are watching us on YouTube live stream, and thank you everyone for being there. And we look forward to a very interesting 3 hours. Thank you.
Our first speaker for the day is Ms. Rachna Mudraboya. Human Rights Law Network, New Delhi, India. Rachana Mudraboya is a trans activist and one of the founding members of Telangana Hijra Intersex Transgender Samiti and the founder of Transvision. Ms. Mudra Moria is an assistant professor, Department of Critical Care Medicine, Mahatma Gandhi Medical College and Research Institute. She is a queer activist working with Human Rights Law Network. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you for such a nice introduction, and thank you, Payal and all my co-panelists also for letting me this chance to be on the panel to discuss with the people about the marginalization of LGBTQI people within our country. So my name is Rachana Mudraboina. I identify myself as a trans woman, and I am from Hyderabad. I'm also founding member of various things. Among them, first one of such is like Telangana Hijra Intersex Transgender Samiti, a unregistered, unfunded collective. Under this banner, we have done state level and national level advocacy with the government and non-government organizations, entities, further from on the trans rights. Apart from that, sorry, as Payalji told that I'm also founding member of Transvision, a YouTube channel, which we have initiated in 2017, and which talks about various issues of trans people. And this channel is exclusively technically done by the trans people as a team. And apart from that, we have also started a pride event in Telangana when the Telangana state was formed in 2014, and under the banner Telangana Queer Swabhimana Yatra. So we have to decolonize the pride. So we have changed the name to the local name, Swabhimana Yatra, which in English we used to listen as a pride. So that's my introduction. And as I said, pride, you all the people might have listened about the pride marches and the pride month, which happened starting from, February normally. So there is a history for the pride marches, and why we have chosen these unique months only, and what is the historical evidence or witness which happened with LGBT communities regarding pride, I want to share in the row of this human rights session online we are doing now. So late in 1969, there were some riots called the Stonewall riots, which are happened in Manhattan, near Manhattan, near the New York, in a inn called the Stonewall Inn. So the police raided in the late hours this inn, and this inn is known for the LGBTQI people for get together, and they started threatening them, throwing them, and hitting them on them to vacate the inn. And then this has happened in 1969. Mm, uh, and then the LGBTQ people who are in that inn have revolted against this. They protested very silently, and such protest and such march. Sorry, and such protest and march has been first called as the first Pride March, which happened against uh, the police atrocities by on transgender people. So Uh, so keeping that on online, such pride marches has will happen across the world and happening across the world just to show and just to challenge the homophobia and transphobia across the world, which happens to the LGBT people. Let me say what is homophobia. Homophobia is the fear of a lesbian, bisexual, gay people for the having the different sexual different sexuality. And transphobia is the fear of trans people for having a different gender identity other than the binary which the society has been identified only. So These Stonewall riots happened in the June month, 28th, 1969 year, and from then we started observing the Pride events across the world in the starting of the every year till the June. So across the Pride, we walk in the Pride, the LGBTQI people. So let me say what are the LGBTQ. As I said, that lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people, we walk together, we march together to show our pride, saying that we are not unequal to the other binaries or other similar or sexualities which the society acknowledge for what they have been, and we raise our voice against the human rights violation happens to the LGBTQI people across the world. So the so this is the starting when we have to open the history of LGBTQI people across the world. And apart from that, when we come to the India, what is the fight of LGBTQI people? And one historical fight ever have been is the fight across around the IPC 377. As you all know, the Indian Penal Code 377 criminalizes the same sexual relationship. So the section reads as other than the penile-vaginal sex, whatever sex done by any person will be criminalized for a penalty of 10 years imprisonment along with some money to be paid as a penalty. So this so-called provision has come into the Indian laws, Indian Penal Code, which has been first introduced in 1861 by the British when the India was under the British rule. So this is modeled as a model under the Beggary Act of 1533. This is a pre-independence era when the India was under British rule, and the same has been continued into the Indian law and Indian Penal Code also. And this a portion of first IPC 377 claiming the same-sex relationship as a crime has been first challenged and has been told and has been declared as unconstitutional in 2009 when NAS Foundation has challenged this provision in the first in Delhi High Court. But the same judgment has been overturned in 2019 in Suresh Kumar versus NAS Foundation. The court held that amending, repealing, or section of that 377 should be done by the parliament only, and the courts cannot do the same. On February 2016, a three members bench of court reviewed the curative petition by the NAS Foundation and others and decided they would be reviewed by five members constitutional bench. On to 24 August 2017, the Supreme Court upheld the right of privacy as a fundamental right in the Puttaswamy judgment, as you all know. And the court also called the equality and condemned discrimination, stated that protection of sexual orientation lies as the core of the fundamental rights of Indian Constitution, which means having a different sexuality also includes the basic rights given by the Indian Constitution under the Article 15 and 16. So the LGBT population are real and founded on constitutional doctrines. The judgment was believed to imply the unconstitutional constitutionality of Section 377. So in January 2018, Supreme Court agreed to hear again, once again, the petition to revisit the 2013 NAS versus NAS Foundation judgment, and on 6th September 2018, the court ruled out unanimously in the Naute Johar Union of India this Section 377. And before the 377 has decriminalized the section, in 2014 there was a historical judgment for transgender people, which has been believed as a victory of transgender people. So in 2014, NALSA versus National Legal Service Authorities versus Union of India, the Supreme Court has held that the transgender people of this country also uh, have the constitutional rights, and having a different sexuality is not a crime. So, the Supreme Court also delivered this historical judgment saying that gender is not in binary and it is a continuum of and continuum spectrum between the two ends, the male or female. By this judgment, the Supreme Court of India said that the trans people of this country can self-identify themselves. No other can identify them, either doctor or the parents or the neighbors or the friends. The trans person themselves have can self-identify as a trans, and the court has given three options. They can identify themselves as a male or a female or a trans person, and the trans person and is called as a third gender according to the court narrative. And this open identification or definition doesn't is not in a closed end one. This can be construed as that can be identified as a third gender in the sense of third gender includes trans women, trans men, intersex people, Hijra or Aravani, Jogappa, Jokti, Nopi Mandi, and any other such identity which the trans person identify themselves with any of the terminology, in which means that a trans person can be identified with any terminology, but they themselves can only identify themselves as a trans, and the self-identity principle has been sustained over. And any such surgical message or procedure is not required as per the Supreme Court judgment, and forcing any trans person to undergo such surgical methods is illegal according to the Supreme Court verdict 2014. So this is the one part of the Supreme Court judgment of 2014, the third, which is famously known as the third gender verdict. And the second part of this verdict is that the community, transgender community, should be considered as a backward class, which means that whatever the benefits or reservations which are applicable for the backward class as listed in the constitution should be also be given to the transgender people. So in 2014, this judgment has delivered, and 2018, based on this judgment and also some privacy judgments, the 377 has been decriminalized. So these are the two historical judgments in Indian human rights history, which reinstates and reestablishes that the Constitution of India doesn't discriminate the LGBTQI people for having a different sorry, for having a different gender orientation or a sexual identity. So this is the starting. But what happened to the human rights of LGBTQI people after these two historical judgments? I should also mention in this row what is the historical value or the identification given to the trans people, mostly trans people. Uh, so there are some Denotified Tribes Act or Criminal Tribes Act late in 1871 somewhere, uh, uh, which is known in Hindi as Vimukta Jati Act. And this so-called Criminal Tribes Act has an has declared few tribes as addicted to the systematic commission of crime, so they have been denotified on the non-bailable offences. And on the same row and following this denotified tribes act or criminal tribes act, there are few acts which has been a burden on the transgender community also. One of such acts is the Hyderabad Eunuchs Act. So the Hyderabad Eunuchs Act, which is a mm, pre-independence act, which has been enacted somewhere around in 1329. That is very far, and during when the Hyderabad region is under a Nizam's rule. And this act basically talks about eunuchs. Eunuchs is a derogatory term. The transgender people doesn't want to identify as a eunuch, because eunuchs, what does it mean is Eunuchs is a forcefully emasculation in the sense of removing the sexual organs of uh, men or young adult boys, and removing their organs and making them to be impotent. And this whole procedure, and the a person who arrived or derived after this procedure is called eunuch. But transgender never identify themselves as a eunuch. The eunuch is a derogatory term. Transgender identify their identity with a pride, calling themselves as a trans or the Hijra community, which has a cultural acceptance in South Asian region, because being a transgender person, and having a self identity and going through a condition called gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a condition which means the bodily sexual identity has a conflict with the psychological sexual identity, and that is what the gender identity means. The sex in which a person has been born and brought up doesn't match with the psychological sex and gender which the person is living in at present. So the WHO and the American Psychiatric Institute also told that such condition is a different condition. It's a diversity. It's not a defect, and either it is not a sickness. So having a different gender identity, it can be trans or any other such identity other than binary, is not uh, unhealthy behavior, or it's not a disease also. So, this UNUS Act, the 1329 Hyderabad UNUS Act, came into records after the Telangana state has been formed in 2014. And according to this act, the government has power to pass on any such orders pertaining to the movement of the transgender people, which they did term as a eunuchs. And according to this act, the privacy of the transgender people has been under attack. Their movement from within the state or outside the state should be recorded with the local police station, and they are not allowed to wear or drag. They're not allowed to wear clothes other than in gender which they are born in, and any entry and any movement of such persons can be restricted under this act. So this has been challenged in the High Court of Telangana, means Hyderabad, and the court has given order that no transgender person should be booked under the Hyderabad Eunuchs Act, saying that this should be get repealed of, because this goes against the Indian Constitution and also go against the face of NALSA versus uh, Union of India, which says that the transgender people also have equal constitutional rights based on its fundamental rights engraved in the Articles 15, 16. So this Hyderabad Eunuchs Act also has been become historical battle of LGBTQI people of Indian countries. So till now we have discussed the Indian Penal Code 377, which has been decriminalized in 2018, and the 2014 NALSA versus Union of India, which identifies transgender people as a third gender, and also asks the states to implement it, that the community should be considered as a backward caste class community. And the third one is the Hyderabad Eunuchs Act, which restricts the movement of transgender people, which has been get repealed of. So this is the systematic and legal battle, and these are the basic rights and the basic legal battles which has been fought in the court of law and got these judgments. Apart from this, there are also few other transgender activists who are across the country have been striving hard for the human rights of LGBTQI people. For example, based on 2014 NALSA versus Union of India transgender judgment, the Dalit rights activist Grace Panu in Tamil Nadu has approached the High Court of Tamil Nadu. Sorry, High Court of Tamil Nadu, saying that she challenged that the notification of the of police recruitment doesn't over any doesn't carry over any third gender column for transgender people. Then this is in the Pritika Yashni case, which is very historical in whole trans history of this country. Then High Court of Tamil Nadu told the Tamil Nadu government to sorry to provide reservation and provide such column in the police recruitment. And Pritika Yashni has been appointed as a SI directly, being a woman. So after that, Tarika Banu versus State of Tamil Nadu and Grace Banu versus State of Tamil Nadu are the two cases, historical cases, where Grace Banu herself has been admitted into a engineering college, and Tarika Banu, her trans daughter, has been admitted into a medical college based on the reservation granted to the transgender people as a backward class in the India Nalsa versus Union of India. So there has been a historical or cultural legal battles fought by various people. For example, Reshma from Bihar has fought for a third gender column in PAN with Income Tax Department. Swati Vidhan Barwa has also filed a case in Guwahati High Court for the non-implementation of NALSA versus Union of India, and she's also a transgender lawyer, Swati Vidhana Barwa, and has got a welfare board for the state of Assam for the transgender people. So, like this, there are various cases across the country which are claiming for the transgender people's right and claiming for the institutionalization of the Supreme Court judgment of 2014. So, and there are also a lot of human rights violations happen with the transgender people, which came very visible in front of us. For example, mostly the trans women who are into the sex work, because transgender people have only two professions historically, either begging or the sex work. These two professions are not the professions given by very offering to the by the society, but these two professions are developed by themselves out of nothing. They are giving no place and no reservation in the traditional education system or the traditional employment system. You won't find any transgender people, any such traditional employment system like in schools, colleges, or universities either, or in any such jobs like doctors, lawyers, or IPS or IAS. This is the institutionalized transphobia in our society, which which has pushed the transgender people into the fringes of the society. But after 2014, we can say that openly the transgender rights and the human rights on the line of human rights and their violation and for challenging the human rights of transgender people, the battle has been started. Now, coming to the other LGBTQI people, the 2018 decriminalization of 377 IPC 377 has turned over a lot of things in the grassroots level. For example, this is a beautiful judgment in the history of LGBTQI movement of history of India, because the judgment has revealed a lot of things. And it has explained, it has given a perception about the LGBTQI people. Before this judgment, a lot of parents of LGBTQI people used to fear, scare of the human rights violation of their children, the parents of LGBTQI people. For example, a mother of a gay person used to fear, if her son has been revealed as a gay, come out as a gay, what happens to him? He may be criminalized at any point of time under 377 and put behind the bars. And the same way, the lesbian community, there is a lot of force, historical force and cultural force on lesbian community to get them married with the mainstream or cis men, which has been historically done. And there are also few families which encourage the corrective rape on lesbian women to show them that they are women, though their sexuality is a lesbian. So, so let me tell to the audience also, the gay persons have the sexual preference of choosing man as their sexual partner, being a man, and the lesbian community have a right to choose women as the sexual partner, being a lesbian woman. So, but in by the lesbian community or the women community are forced to corrupt to rape or the forced to marriage with the cis men and have children. So, which goes against the law, and it's a core violation of human rights of LG people and LGB people, and this has been turned over by this historical judgment. Now the parents feel very safe that even though their children are belonging to the LGB community, they can openly come out saying that they belong to such community, and there is no criminalization of such identity now yet. And apart from that, the discussions over around the welfare measures for along with the other cis people, how the male and female or other sexual oriented people have been part of the welfare measures like the pensions or the housing schemes or the educational benefits, scholarships, etc. will also be during these discussions. Hopefully, the LGBTQI people are also kept into the in the mind during the discussions. So, but last not the least, I want to discuss about the historical struggle around the trans gender persons protection of rights act 2019. So as I said in previously, like in 2014, in Nalsa versus Union of India judgment, the Supreme Court said that the self-identity principle should be there for trans people, and the trans people should be identified as a backward class, and the central and state government should take necessary steps for such implementation of the judgment. But no government has taken such steps. As I told, there are a lot of legal battles to be fought on the ground to make the implementation of NALSA judgment. But in 2016, very surprisingly, we can see that the government has brought a bill which again goes off or goes on the face of NALSA versus Union of India on various lines. For example, this particular 2016 bill has saying that a transgender person should be medically screened, means the body should be medically screened to judge that such person is a trans person or not, or a female or a male, in which means that a transgender person should go nude in front of any doctor or committee to prove herself or himself or themselves as a trans person, which is utmost and the core violation of human rights, I feel. Because for proving one's gender, either male or female, when people doesn't go in nude in front of any person, why should transgender person should be forced to go nude in front of any committee or a doctor to just prove themselves as a trans? And which the Supreme Court already said that no surgical procedure is necessary to declare one person as a themselves as a trans person, and a self-identity principle should be established. So, in 2014, a private member bill from the political party Dravida Munnetra Kalagam, Raja, DMK Raja, has produced a private members bill which has been unanimously accepted in the Rajya Sabha. But without considering the NASA judgment and this private members bill, and this private member bill is a very good bill which is similar to the NASA judgment, implementation of NASA judgment. And without considering the NASA judgment and also this Tiruchi Shiva bill of 2014 on transgender persons, government has brought this 2016 bill. And there are 27 such changes. We, as a committee, national level committee, I headed this organizing committee at the national level. We asked the government of India to do 27 changes to this bill because on various lines it goes against the NASA judgment of 2014. As I said, one is the gender screening. The second is it also criminalizes the begging. So begging has been the only livelihood option, one of the livelihood options other than sex work for the trans people. So this bill 2016 bill criminalizes this begging for 2 years, and also the enticement of begging is also criminalized. And this may criminalize the Hijra system. The Hijra system has been on living of Badai system. Badai is a similar type of begging where the Hijra people go in the event of birth, childbirth or marriages or any such auspicious occasion, and they give blessings to other communities. Such begging may be criminalized, and enticement if a guru, and there is a guru chela relation, the teacher and the disciple relationship within the Hijra community. And if the guru told any of such chela, a disciple, to go and get alms from some house, and that such behavior can also be treated as enticement of begging, and the guru can be criminalized. So this criminalization is a multi-dimensional and multi-risky for the Hijra community. It may dismantle on the long run the whole Hijra community because it criminalizes the Hijra guru, and it criminalizes the begging itself. So we also ask in these recommendations to consider this. So there are 27 such uh, changes we ask the government to bring for the 2016 transgender persons bill, and the joint parliamentary committee also have uh, sustained our queries and said that there should be a lot of changes to be done. So after 2016 till 2019, we have been continuously asking, sorry, we're continually asking the government. And in 2019, this so-called bill, during before the end of lockdown, before the starting of lockdown, in 2019 December, the so-called bill has become an act, which has been passed by the both houses of parliament. But there are only seven such changes from 27 to gradually they have curtailed and have done every changes to this act, and seven such changes, basic changes, which has not done to this act. And so the act itself has been challenged by me in the Supreme Court, along with 10 more other transgender rights activists across the country. So apart from this, I want to also share what has been done on during this COVID or lockdown period, and then I will end this, and I will be open for the question. During the COVID period, this so-called act, the Transgender Persons Protection Act of 2019, the government has published the rules in the lockdown, and they have given only 10 days period to act on that and to go give suggestions on that. That is the first notification they have given. But we ask them to extend the time because there is no such way, because the country has been a diverse country, our country. Various people speak various languages. We need to discuss these rules with the grassroots level community, transgender community, what suits them, what doesn't work for them. So we asked for the extension of time, and they have given the extended the times, and we have done the virtual meetings in various languages, and also we have consolidated the suggestions. We have sent it to the government of India. And very luckily, most of our recommendations have been considered under the rules, and now the rules are also published in the Gazette. So they are in place, and whatever for the gender change and whatever for the identification, the government of India rules are now come into existence. Though the basic nature of the act, like still says that any person who want the identity of male or female should produce a surgery certificate for such identity, which goes against the face of NALSA judgment, has been under the consideration of Supreme Court decision, because the public interest litigation is still pending with the Supreme Court of India. So this is the thing. And during the COVID, we have written when the lockdown has started. As you all know, as I said also, the transgender community, mostly the Hijra community or the trans women community, are dependent on the begging as their livelihood or sex work. During the lockdown, everything has been closed down, and very soon the whatever the short money they have with them has been expired, and they spend it off for their necessities, and they came very near to the poverty. So we asked the government of India to extend help during the lockdown, and the government of India, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, has provided with a COVID-19 kit worth of 1,500 rupees, which they told they will transfer to the bank accounts, respective bank accounts of transgender people. But there is a technical problem in it. All the transgender people, and where is the number of transgender people? How many people are there in our country? We have only technically 2011 data our country, it says that there are 5 lakhs transgender people across the country. And it also gives the number of transgender people of each state. But that is 2011. Now we are in 2020, and we don't doesn't have any fresh numbers. We feel as a community that it can be a 5 times more, like a 25 lakhs people can be over there. So the a number is one thing very problematic. How to and way to reach the transgender community. Second thing, the bank transfers is very problematic because the social identities like Aadhaar card, PAN card, or voter ID card uh, are not in the gender which they are living to the transgender person. For example, I myself born as a boy and brought up as a boy by my natal family. So all my identities will be in the gender or the name in which I was born and brought up by my family. But once I step out of my family and I identify myself as a trans and declare to the society as a trans, the documents have no change, and there is no policy for the government to do such name or gender change on the documents also. So because of these, a lot of people doesn't have bank accounts. So again, we have to rewrite to the government saying that they should consider this one. Then the government said that then we'll pass on and we'll give this COVID kit through the respective district collectorates, and the people can come to the collectorate and prove their identity and take this kit. And after so many recommendations and consultations, and only 5,000 people across the country get benefit of COVID-19 kit from the government of India, which is 1% of 2011 5 lakhs population. So we again have to write to the government saying that to extend to the 99% of other community members also such schemes. And because the lockdown has been prolonged and the pandemic is still, we are living in pandemic, to increase the amount of 1,500 to the 3,000 for the people. Apart from that, many of the transgender rights activists across the country have collected various resources like food, groceries, medicines, and masks and sanitizers from the civil society members, and distributed them to their own community members till, and they have done it for the as a door delivery. And the basic human rights violation is still going on, may happen more further if the government doesn't step in, is that there should be a regular checkup or testing for COVID-19 without any discrimination for the transgender people. And there should be social psychological counseling because during the lockdown or due to the COVID-19 fear, a lot of people are went into the trauma. And for trans people, trauma has been a repetitive period because they are excluded and discriminated by the society, by their own families, by their own kith and kin. So they need a regular social psychological counseling, which has not yet provided by any organization. That's the one. Second thing, third thing is many of the owners of transgender people asked to vacate the house because of fear of transmission of COVID by trans people, which is a visible transphobia on transgender people. So the state or the government should take steps to um, provide alternate housing system. And during this COVID, we approached 9 such high courts of India in various states, saying that what are the government measures taken to help the transgender people during pandemic or lockdown. So the courts also order very positively, uh, saying that the government should take the note of this and should have the list of transgender people, and they should provide the basic amenities like food, groceries, medicines, and also masks, sanitizers, and ART, antiretroviral medicines for HIV infected people, and also the vitamin supplements or fruits without asking any identity of them because they normally doesn't carry any such social entitlements. So I'll end up over here. I'll be looking for the queries, whatever the audience have, and I'm open for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your session. That was very informative and enlightening.
Thank you.
We would like to wait on the backstage as after both sessions end, there will be questions asked by the participants who are viewing our program via YouTube. So please stay with us, ma'am.
Sure, thank you.
Our next esteemed speaker for this panel is Dr. Bashabi Chakraborty, Senior Faculty Member in Sociology, Rabindra Bharati University. She is the founder member and senior faculty member in the Department of Sociology, Rabindra Bharati University, and former visiting faculty, Women Studies Research Center, Calcutta University. Dr. Bashavi Chakraborty worked as a research associate in sociology at Center for Urban Economic Studies, Calcutta University for 13 years. She participated in different national and international seminars as speaker and chairperson. She also taught as guest faculty in the Department of Sociology as Presidency University, Kalyani University, West Bengal State University, NSOU, and IGNOU. Her area of interest is sociology of gender, sociology of social relations, urban sociology, and sociology of literature. She also taught as guest faculty in the Department of Sociology, Calcutta University. The books published by her are প্রসঙ্গ মনোবিদ্যা, ভারতীয় সমাজ সাম্প্রতিক সমস্যা, নারী পৃথিবী বহুস্বর, women studies various aspect, সমাজবিদ্যা তাত্ত্বিক রূপরেখা, which is going to be published soon. Over to you, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Good morning to everyone. And before probing into my discussion, I would like to extend my thanks to Dr. Payal Rai Choudhury, Coordinator and Head of Human Rights Department, RBU, for organizing such a important international webinar on this very pertinent topic, that is the vulnerable groups and human rights, in collaboration with the Department of Disability Studies, Rabindra Bharati University. I do also belong to the family of Rabindra Bharati, so it is an extra pleasure for me. And thanks to Dr. Payal Rai Choudhury for inviting me to say few words and share my views on this topic. My co-speaker, MS Rachna, has mentioned the legal aspects and many other things related to the transgender community, because she also belongs to this group. But I am a cisgender person and I have no such direct research experience regarding the transgender community. But out of my interest, I had organized a seminar in my own department at Rabindra Bharati University named Beyond Gender Issues and Challenges. And in this seminar, I had invited one trans man and trans woman, and also few academicians who are interested to express their views on transgender community, and one also academic person but right activist, Dr. Shoma Marik, who is the keynote speaker of this seminar. Secondly, on 2019, I also participated in a workshop organized by Human Rights Law Network, and I was invited there as a resource person and expressed my views on sexual harassment at workplace. And out of interest, I had participated at that seminar and expressed my view according to me, what I think is good and or bad, etc., etc. But in today's seminar, my topic, which I am going to deliver the lecture on, the topic is the impact of COVID-19 and lockdown on the transgender community on India. Some points may be overlapping because MS Rachna has already mentioned few aspects of this. Yet As an academic person, I would like to highlight the sufferings faced by the LGBT community in these dark times, in these pandemic days. We all know that sociologists always do believe in the first-hand knowledge, and that is the primary data. But in these pandemic days, it's not possible for me to take any face-to-face interview with any trans man or trans woman, but I have tried my level best to talk with few trans men and trans women and few right activists over phone and over video call. And also I have collected some data based on the findings of their research, like the Center for Law, that is Law Center for Law and Research and Policy, based on it is based on Bangalore, and also the input of the report of the independent expert prepared by YP Foundation. It is also based on the New Delhi. So let's start my discussion. So we all know that on 13 January 2020, Director General WHO declared the outbreak of novel coronavirus as a public health emergency of international concerns. And it is very surprising that on the same day, India reported its first case in Kerala. And on the evening of that 24th March 2020, the government also announced a nationwide lockdown to combat COVID-19. So we all know that what is the focus of the lockdown? The focus of the lockdown was on the closures of all activities except essential services, and urging people to stay at home by saying that stay at home and stay safe, and enforcing public-led social distancing intervention. So no doubt the lockdown appeared to be an appropriate and necessary measure, and restrictions on mobility led many people to face unexpected challenges. And against this backdrop, I would like to say that this COVID pandemic, the novel coronavirus or COVID-19, it does not affect everyone evenly or equally. And it has accelerated the sufferings of the transgender community, who are already and usually marginalized in our society. But before probing into this discussion, I would like to mention that LGBT is an initialism that stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, in use since 1990s. And the term is an adaptation of the initialism LGB in reference to the LGBT community beginning in the mid to late 1980s. And activists do believe that the term gay community did not accurately represent all those to whom it referred. So the initialism has been adopted into the mainstream as an umbrella term for use when labeling topics pertain to sexuality and gender identity. The initialism LGBT is intended to emphasize the diversity of sexuality and gender identity based culture. So it may be used to refer to anyone who is non-heterosexual or non-cisgender, instead of exclusively to people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. To recognize the inclusion, other two popular variants add the letters Q and I for those who identified as queer and intersex. We all know that queer are questioning their sexual identity, where intersexual is having the condition of being the intermediate between the male and female. So now we can say that the terms LGBTIQA, it intend to encompass spectrums of sexuality and gender. And now I can say that we, being the Indian, we all know the Constitution of India in the Constitution of India, fundamental rights prohibit discrimination. It states very clearly that it's prohibit discrimination on the ground of sex. But in the case of the LGBTQIA, minority people faces very much discrimination, as like lack of educational facilities, right to life and personal liberty, right to live within the family, right to speech, right to profession and business, equal pay for equal work, and right to live with dignity, and lastly and finally, right to equality. So now coming to the issue of the impact of COVID-19 on the LGBTQIA person, we can state that this pandemic and nationwide lockdown has been detrimental to the lives of these persons on various aspects. Firstly, we can say that a number of persons are compelled into poverty and homelessness with no support system as a result of social stigma and social discrimination. So, according to a transgender right activist, we all know, perhaps those who are working with this issue, they all know him, Ellen Tripathi. According to Tripathi, people of this community may not die of COVID, but they may die due to hunger. Another person belonging to this community said, for my daily bread and butter, I was begging in the local train in Mumbai, especially in the ladies' compartment. When the one-day curfew was announced, I assumed people would return to work. But very soon I realized that after the announcement of total shutdown, people had started working from home. As such, my income got affected. This lockdown totally ruined my life. And according to a trans man, say his name is to be changed name, in the absence of jobs and financial independence, things become more complex. For society, we have always been invisible. To who we have to help ourselves because none will help us. Since a large number of persons belonging to this community do not have proper government ID, as also mentioned by Ms. Rachna, like Aadhaar card, ration card, or PAN card, they are facing extreme difficulties accessing relief care packages and services being provided by the state. And in this context, I would also like to mention that the persons belonging to this community had struggled hard to meet their ends. In a petition filed by Vaijanti Vasanta Magli, the Telangana High Court passed an order directing state government to ensure the transgender community's member have ready availability of food grains, consumable items as per their requirements, free of cost and without insisting on the production of ration card. Similarly, Jharkhand High Court directed the state government to ensure basic needs to trans persons during lockdown in the form of guaranteed rations without the requirements of the ration card. And now coming to the point of the access to healthcare is already also to some extent mentioned by MS Rachina, but still I do like to mention that the early in the early on the COVID-19 pandemic period, the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights, they pointed out that in the inevitable fallout of the pandemic, government must make sure that marginalized groups have unimpeded access to healthcare, and that lockdown and quarantine measures should be in strict compliance of human rights standards relating to health. Similarly, UNAIDS, that is the Joint United Nations Program on HIV and AIDS, identified identified key populations particularly vulnerable to the effects of COVID-19 virus, that is particularly trans sex workers who are immunocompromised due to high incidence of HIV. And despite these recommendations and India's protracted work on HIV prevention, the lockdown this observed unprecedented inaccessibility to healthcare, particularly in regard to the availability of antiretroviral or viral or ART medication and access to ART centers. ARTs, because in these pandemic days, ART centers were understaffed and so making it difficult to register new persons or new patients. The effects of missing out regular dosage of the ART medication, it has a severe and a fatal impact on the lives of HIV positive persons. And which is more important is that the indefinite lockdown and containment zones created large gaps in treatment. Many trans persons who are in the process of sex change had to stop hormone medications. That is, we know that a hormone replacement therapy, because during pandemic days in many hospitals and or health centers, besides COVID-19, other types of treatment also are not available, like the trans persons who have been suffering from the diabetes, like me, and heart problems and other ailments could not, and they are not able to go to hospitals as transportations are not available. And now, coming to the most important point, that is the COVID affected trans persons, we can say that there have no numbers, no statistics, how many trans persons were infected with the virus, and the concern that there are no quarantine centers or isolation wards in hospital which was observed. In some states like Telangana, by way of a High Court order, the government at last agreed to provide for wards within government hospitals for transgender persons. And in this context, the scenario of the West Bengal, of course, is no exception. The West Bengal government has reserved 10 beds for transgender persons at government COVID hospital named MR Bangur Hospital. And I also come to know from a right activist that the Islampur Ramin Hospital also makes some arrangements for a separate ward for the COVID affected trans persons. And government of Manipur Social Welfare Department opened first transgender quarantine center in Imphal to accommodate its transgender people. And state governments of Kerala came out in support of transgender person by providing shelter home during pandemic. And now coming to the point of the mental health that I already mentioned in the discussion of the MS Rachana, that is the mental health issue. We all know that to the common person, the mental health issue is also very important. And during these COVID days and during the quarantine period, the cisgender people also are facing severe type of depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and etc. etc. So in their case, this mental health issue becomes very important. So let's have a look on this point. There have been reports of individual cases of LGBT persons being forced to get married despite revealing their sexual orientation to their families during lockdown. And so not only the cis women, these types of peoples are facing also severe type of the domestic violence within the four wall of the family. And they are also not able to flee and go to a safe place in these pandemic days. One such incident that received media attention was the death of the two women in Tamil Nadu by suicide during lockdown. Transgender right activist Dr. Shoma Marik, who is associated with his group 10 থেকে 10,000 from 10 to 10,000, his comments, such sad incidents of suicide did not only take place in one state only. During pandemic situation throughout India, suicide rate among this person is increasing, and all these are very sad incidents. And now, going next, emphasizing on these mental health problem, we can say that a number of trans persons have been, I have mentioned already that number of trans persons have been suffering from anxiety, depression, which emerges from their financial insecurity, uncertainty, and hopelessness. Here, I like to mention that the Indian Psychiatry Society points out that through their survey that the number of reported cases of mental illness rose by 20% within 1 week of the national lockdown in India, which started at 24th March 2020. According to the study published in 2019 in American Journal of Psychiatry, it has been found that individuals with gender incongruency are 6 times more likely to have mood swings and suicidal tendency compared to the heterosexual persons. During pandemic situation, the one important thing I would like to mention that these transgender persons who are currently under the hormone replacement therapy or HRT, they are also facing challenges in continuing their treatment. Sudden stoppage of the estrogen and progesterone hormone therapy leads to depression and mood swinging and anxiety. We all know that the hormonal problems also leads to several types of the mental agony and mental problems like depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, etc., etc. So, irrespective of the hormone therapy, sudden stoppage of hormone replacement therapy would cause another problem that is also mentioned by Dr. Rachana, that is the gender dysphoria, where the individual may suffer from mental conflict between the two genders. And moreover, with no access to friends, lovers, and community, many trans persons found themselves particularly lonely and isolated, and those who have been driven from their rented home because they are not able to pay rent for the financial crisis, they are bound to go their own home in remote villages. And in that situation, they could not connect with their friends or the community due to lack of internet access. And being lonely and isolated, they have been suffering from depression and anxiety. And now, another important point I would like to highlight, that is the police brutality, violence, and stigma. Now, we know that structural violence, whether by institutions or by police, against trans persons is well documented in India. Generally, trans persons face human rights violation almost every day in the form of abuse, physical and sexual violence, most of which go unreported and undocumented. But during lockdown, it is very striking that the enhanced police power in India, it saw a spike escalation in police brutality. Under the guise of what is the cause? What is the cause of this spike escalation of the police brutality? Because under the guise of the enforcing lockdown, the violence against transgender people has increased by police power. 2 months back, I would like to share my views regarding the harassment of a right activist and a trans woman in Kolkata 2 months back in the open road. This trans woman, and as well as the trans rightist who has been working during these pandemic days and since lockdown, work hard to provide necessary goods, medicines, and other amenities to the people belonging to the community. But that woman had been harassed by police in the open road in Kolkata. I I don't like to disclose her name, but one thing I would like to again I like to mention that though United Nations Secretary General called for an end to stop violence against transgender persons during these pandemic days, and also directed police to misuse not to directed police not to misuse their power by targeting this minority people. So in India, the trans community witnessed heightened police brutality for trans people, and the persons to whom I have talked over phone, they also again and again, they also voiced their protest against this police brutality and the exposition of their power. And this police brutality for the transgender people who were already found homeless or were trying to access medicines. They were violently removed from the streets and faced physical violence as well. Hence, it is very apt to mention here, I think, that in Telangana, malicious propaganda against the transgender persons as the harbinger of the COVID-19 made them more and more vulnerable. Outside the shopping malls in the city and in the outside the metro station, posters and in very high buildings, posters were stuck saying that the, the disease like HIV and AIDS, the trans person also like the two these diseases, transgender persons have brought the virus, this COVID-19 or novel coronavirus. So this is the situation, and these all the challenges and sufferings faced by the transgender community. Ms. Rachina has already mentioned the legal aspect of the legal aspect related to their positions in the community, and they also mentioned the Nalsa judgment, which is a landmark decision by the Supreme or Apex Court, legally recognized the third gender, and the unique part of this judgment is that the transgender persons for the first time they are able to discuss about gender identity at length, and Supreme Court also recognized that third gender persons were entitled to fundamental rights which I have mentioned in the beginning of my discussion under the constitution and under the international law. So they also mentioned about the hijras or eunuchs, that hijras or eunuchs, they can legally identify as third gender, and they also clarify it that gender identity did not refer to only biological characteristics, but rather referred to it as an innate perception of one gender, which I think is sociologically also very important. The court also held that is very important, I think, that public awareness programs are required to tackle stigma against the transgender community. It also directed the central and state government to take immediate measures or proper measures and for the advancement of the transgender persons. And as already mentioned by Ms. Rachina, the abolition of the section 377 of the penal code, the section of Indian Penal Code, which was introduced during the British rule in 1861, and it is still continuing. And this on 6 September 2018, the Supreme Court, in its landmark judgment, ruled that the application of the section 377 to consensual homosexual relation between the adults was not unconstitutional. And but before it was judged as the unconstitutional and irrational. But the judgment give a new path, a new avenue to the transgender persons. And here I would like to mention that the 2019 Act, the Act of the Protection of the Human Rights of the transgender persons, that these 2019 Act gives the district magistrate the power to recognize a person as trans. There is a gap between these two. While the Nalsa judgment allowed self-identification of gender, but the Nalsa judgment had further said that any insistence on the sex reconstruction surgery was immoral and illegal. It states that self-determination is very important in this context. And the most important point I would like to discuss, that these amidst the nationwide lockdown, the government surprisingly released the draft rules for the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act on 18th April 2020 with a 12-day deadline to submit any relevant inputs. This is inconsistent with the pre-legislative consultation policy 2014, which specifies that such information should be kept in public domain for a minimum of 30 days. The deadline was later extended to 18th May, still within the lockdown period. 18 May 2020, after criticism from various trans rights and human rights activists across the country. And it also should show the 2019 Act, it institutionalizes legal discrimination by making punishment for sexual abuse against transgenders imprisonment of not less than 6 months, but which may extend to 2 years and with the fine. But in the case of the normal people like us, this is much less than punishment for rape against women under IPC, which is imprisonment of the is a gap. Here the IPC's Act is more cruel, because here the imprisonment of not less than 7 years, and which may be for life or for a term, which may extend to 10 years and shall also be liable for fine. So we think that there is also in the mainstream society, the trans people are always being marginalized, cornered, exploited in many ways. And but in the legal provisions also there is a gap which should not exist, I think. So discrimination is everywhere. Discrimination is everywhere. Now, as a sociologist and as an academic person, I have few recommendations regarding the transgender community's upliftment. I think that the central and the state government have to recognize that the persons belonging to the community are among those particularly vulnerable in the crisis, and must take targeted steps to ensure that they should be included while addressing the pandemic. Secondly, all welfare schemes and the relief measures should take into account gender diversity, especially in terms of eligibility requirement, and should take the more unbiased approach. And thirdly, in this crisis period, foods and rations are urgently needed at a large scale, and that should be provided free of cost. Persons belonging to this community and other marginalized groups in the society, who are not able to access the ration cards and other government ID cards, but in these crisis situations, basic foods and nutrition security should be given to them without any other government ID card. There is no need of showing all these ID cards. And thirdly, the government needs to make a monthly cash assistance And here I like to add that in some states, this cash assistance have been given in the, but it is very meager in number. Somewhere it is 1,000, somewhere it is 15,000, etc. So the government needs to make a monthly cash assistance to these people at least for the next 6 months, as they have no means for livelihood and to bear their daily expenses. And next, the fifthly, these people badly in need to access the safe and affordable housing and shelter. When I have talked to the few trans man and trans person, and they say that there is no rehab center anywhere in West Bengal. I don't know the scenario of the other states beyond West Bengal, but in West Bengal there is no rehab center for these for the people belonging to the community. And sixthly, all these people have been suffering. I have already mentioned that physically and also mentally. So, as they had not access to basic health care, and many suffer for various ailments, so the government should make proper arrangements for their treatment, and also in the OPD, in the various government hospital, there they should make arrangements. The government should make arrangements for their treatment, and the disease like the high blood pressure, diabetes, heart problem, and so on. So, and the HIV treatment and the hormone therapy treatment, it also needs to be provided for those persons who have gone through the sex change operations, and these treatments could not be interrupted as far as our knowledge concerns. And seventhly, it is also important that more lawyers should be encouraged to work with the marginalized communities or groups by which they could have to access their fundamental rights, their human rights, and constitutional remedies. And lastly, I would like to say there is no need for building solidarity within trans network, and also awareness campaign and literature should be made available through the mass media. But the surprising thing is that the coverage of mass media on the sufferings or the abuse of the on the transgender people in most times remain underreported. They deal with so many issues and published in the daily newspapers and show them in the various channels, but they turn a deaf ear to the sufferings, to the agony of these people who needs more attention in these dark times, in these pandemic times. So I would like to say lastly that, as mentioned by Dr. Payal Raichaudhuri, that I am a poet also. He mentioned in my introduction that Bashu Bidhi is also a poet, but I am not poet. I am an ardent reader of poet. And lastly, I cannot resist my temptation to quote a poem entitled "I Am Human." It also it is written by transgender trans man or trans woman. I don't know the name. I found in the Google is Adi Peri. I don't know him or her, but the poem is excellent. So I would like to quote it lastly, that I am lesbian, I am gay, I am bi, I am trans, I am straight, I am love, I am kindness, I am caring. I am more than my trauma. I am more than my abuse. I am more than my scars. I am what survival looks like. I am human. So when we are talking in the webinar about the fundamental rights or human rights of these vulnerable groups, so I think this poem is very very showed the piercing reality and the plight of the transgender person, and that was explored in this poem. And Lastly, I would like to say that uh, according to Virginia Woolf, the famous feminist thinker, and also she's a writer, in each of us, two persons preside, one male and one female. And she wrote in in renowned article on gender, and asserting that the androgynous mind is resonant and porous, naturally creative, passionate, and undivided. But although the line between where the mind ends and the body begins, it is ever shifting. We often draw an artificial demarcation between the two, and end up divided within and among ourselves, nowhere more to than in the plight of the transgender people. And when I am talking with Ankon Bishwas, a lawyer, a criminal lawyer practicing in High Court, and a transgender right activist, and a trans man, in the course of my talking with him over phone, I, uh, as an academic person, I say that we should be more sympathetic. The people belonging to the mainstream society should be more sympathetic to these people, because they are also part of the larger society. They are not alien in the society. And in answering these, Onkon became so furious, and answered that we don't in need of sympathy. Our rights should be considered as human rights, because we are also human. We are also part of this larger society, ma'am, as you said. And that is why I always think that we should be considered as the human beings. Our rights should be considered as human rights. And we also need the dignity of the citizens like you. So thank you all. That is the end. Thank you for patience hearing. And if anything I just said in my deliberation is seems overlapping with MS Rachna, but I also mentioned all these in my discussion as an academic person, because I have no, I'm not having deep knowledge or research in this subject, but as a sociologist and as academic person, and out of my concern with these transgender community as a sociologist, I would like to I am in solidarity with them, and I also like to share my views in my deliberation. So thank you all, and thank you the participants, thank you the organizers, and thank you my co-speaker. Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your session. That was very informative and enlightening. So there are some questions at the end of the session. I would like to read them aloud. First, we have question for Miss Rachna. Please do appear on the screen, ma'am.
Yes.
The first question that we're given for you is, do you think it is necessary to include LGBTQI education since childhood at school?
Yes, definitely. Because for two reasons. One thing is to so the kids are not categorized as LGBTQI kids, but mostly gender non-conforming kids whose gender is like the biological gender in which they born has a conflict with the gender they identify with. Sorry, are called as gender non-conforming children. For them, if a sensitization of the teaching staff and non-teaching staff in the school and the parents committee or all other working committee technical committees within the school are not sensitized with, such children will be prone to the bullying, and the bullying leads to the crime or violence, mostly the violence and harassment for such kids. And so kids education and health social cycling sociological condition will be affected. So in order to stop all these bullying and violence happen behind this, all other parties in the school and around the school environment should be sensitized. The second thing is, the school syllabus also should mention about gender non-conforming kids, and also who are the LGBT people according to the age. If like how we will be educating children about reproductive whole cycle, they should be sensitized of LGBT people also, the different sexuality and also different gender. Apart from that, last but not the least, the journeys of trans people, a journey of LGBTQI people should be added as a part of social sciences also, in order to know, in order to eliminate or decrease the homophobia or transphobia happens to the LGBTQI people in public spaces, because their sufferings and their journeys how they came out of that pain will uncover all those social inhibitions and taboos around the LGBTQI people. So the three things are: one is to equip the school teaching both non-teaching staff about LGBT or non-gender non-conforming children. Second thing, uh, the LGBTQI children, regarding them, the knowledge should be given in the school textbooks. The third thing is, they should be what are their needs, specific needs should be addressed. Thank you.
Ma'am, the second question for you is asked by Parveen. We have read about the Gharana tradition in books. I would like to know more about these Gharanas secure the human rights of the individual community or whether it restricts people.
So the whole Gharana, see how we need to know the historical emerging of Gharanas. So as we have already discussed, that Hijra community emerged out of nothing. What do I mean is, like, if a certain community based on the gender discrimination, the trans community based on the gender discrimination and transphobia have been thrown out of the society and kept away from the traditional education employment system. And that's how they have developed their own begging or sex work as a resource of livelihood, and that's how they are able to sustain for a long term, just able to live. At least they are not killed by the violence whatever happens. So the Gharanas have emerged as a self-supporting system for the trans community, who are not owned by the natal families, who are disowned by their families. Lot of adults or young adults who are gender non-conforming or trans people disowned by their family have been taken by these Gharanas, and they live at one place. They beg, they have their own resources, and they share their common resources. They look after one another as a virtual family. So that worked as a virtual social unit, other than your natal family. Your mother is not there, father is not there, your brothers sisters are not there, but it is only community members who have taken care of yourself and sharing the common love among themselves. So this is the structure of Gharana. But any system has its side effects, and the Gharana system is like a pyramid. The guru are there and the chelas are in the bottom. Guru have that power to control the chelas, and sometimes some gurus are also maybe as misfortune, or maybe because of bad behavior, they may also exploit, and may they also prone the chelas to a bonded labor system, which is against the human rights. So when we talk about the human rights of all the people, we also should talk about the human rights violation happened within the Gharanas or the Hijra community also, and we resist this exploitation, we resist this bondage which happens within the Gharanas or in the Hijra system, and we continuously do that, and we use various laws also to control such systematic within the Gharana system, whatever exploitation happens on. So there is a certain sort of, because everything, patriarchy is omnivorous, it's omnipresent, sorry. So it is everywhere, it is the patriarchy is everywhere, and then there is a hierarchy existing over there. There will be certainly human rights violation.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering the question. There is another question made by Anumita Das. If a man changes his gender from SRS, then that person will be called again gay.
Sorry, so you should understand what is a gender diversity and what is having a diversified sexuality. So gender is it can be other than the binary. Means the society has decided male and female genders only. But now we are under gender diversity by saying that it's not the two. It's a spectrum between the two, and they can you can be put in between at any place. You can be transgender, you can be trans woman, you can be trans man. You can put yourself anywhere in between. So gender is like diverse, and it's like a rainbow. It have various colors and combinations, permutations also. This you need to understand. Gender is a social construct. Apart from that, sexuality is the sexual preference, how you sexually get influenced or attracted to other being. That becomes your sexuality. A gay is a person who either being the same sex, attracted to the same sex for the sexual preference or the sexual habits. Such person is called as a gay. So gay is a sexuality, sexual preference of a person. Gender is the gender in how the social construct the society has built up around that.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering the questions. We are very glad. Next questions are for Dr. Bashubi Chakraborty. The first question is by Debashish Kumar Datta. Can only printing knowledge and laws discussing uproot the injustice of problem of LGBTQ? Can we ourselves and our society come forward to help them?
Very good questions, and I have already mentioned in my discussion that the non only the legal provisions and the measures taken by various various organizations run by the right activists, these are not enough. We should take care. We should consider their problems as also as the social problems, not only the problems of a community. So we should be more careful about handling these problems, and the media coverage, as I have already mentioned, that this is very meager, and they and in this context, I would like to say that during the pandemic days, the media glare focused on the max exodus of the migrant workers from urban spaces, and also the food scarcity and certain areas of India, as well as the insufficient relief for the poor population. But the issues of the trans community went largely underreported. This is not fair. The media people, the people belonging to media, they should be more positive about considering the problems of the trans community, and we, the common people, we should be also very positive in our thinking about their sufferings, about their agony, and their marginalization and deprivation, I think.
Thank you so much, ma'am. There is another question by Abhikran Buha. Ma'am, keeping aside the economic impact of cyclical lockdown on intersex communities, what can be someone term policy measure to ensure financial empowerment and upward mobility for the community?
This is a very long question. So please repeat it. I could not follow.
Okay.
What is the?
I'm repeating it again. Keeping aside the economic impact of cyclical lockdowns on the intersex community, what can be someone term policy measure to ensure financial empowerment and upward mobility for the community?
That is that should be the consideration of the administration, because the central government and the state government, through their various welfare measures, they can take care of these the financial problems firstly, then, and they also they also come forward to solve other problems besides the financial problems. we the common people who are talking, eager to talking about them, about their sufferings, about their agony, about their marginalization, we are not in a position to provide any help to them. So that is the task of the administrator at the state level and at the central level, I think.
Thank you, ma'am, for answering the question. I would like to invite Victoria Muller, one of the organizers of this session, and also at the tech expert of our session, to give the formal vote of thanks to the both of our eminent lectures today. Please, Victoria, come on.
Good morning to all. I want to thank on behalf of the Department of Human Rights and Human Development, along with the Department of Disability Studies from Ravindra Bharati University, for such a insightful and a session where we learned so much. I think that we went through the laws, the personal experience, feelings, and things that we as a society, as an human beings, we have to do, and we can contribute to the change. As we were talking before in the questions, we all have the responsibility. This is a social problem, along with the all vulnerable groups that we are talking about in these sessions in the 7 days webinar. So I'm very glad that we point all these different topics and how we can reach to the change, no, to teaching from childhood in school, that is very important, no, to stop the bullying, to start normalizing this thing that is common in society. We are all part of a society, and there should not be exclusion. We have in the law, now we need the cultural change that is happening in different countries. It's a long path, but as you already mentioned, we can continue working on it and the change will be. So I want to say thank you so much again. We are very glad. And personally, I'm from Argentina. So about the Guaranas, it's my first time I listen, and I'm very glad that you mention it and I'm learning about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I visited Argentina.
Yeah.
Buenos Aires.
You went?
Yes, Buenos Aires.
Wow.
Thank
like
you.
It?
Thank you, Pubali. Your name is Pubali.
Yes, ma'am.
Pubali. Thank you both, Victoria and
Thank you,
Pubali,
Puvali.
for giving the nice
you both.
introduction and for the concluding remarks. Thank you. It's a
Bye.
nice experience to share my views in this international webinar, and it is on your part is a very great attempt to address this most important pertinent issues like the vulnerability and also the human rights question. Thank you.
And thank you to you, Basabi Chakrabarti ji.
I am also thankful to you because I am also to some extent enriched by your lecture. To some extent.
And you covered everything which I left. Really. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Then I'll leave.
Okay. Can you leave?
Yeah, we conclude with this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Now, we are about to start with our technical session. The chairperson of this session is by Dr. Sarbari Shen, retired from NILD, an academician, a sincere worker in disability sector. Dr. Sarbari Sen worked at NILD Kolkata for 33 long years. She did commendable work in the area of disability and rehabilitation. She has an MA and PhD in sociology at NILD. She was involved in teaching, training, and research work. Her work in NE region of the India is very remarkable. She was the nodal officer for the state of Tripura and established a center for disability studies in the campus of Mizoram University. Presently, she is a guest faculty in the Department of Human Rights and Human Development, Ravindra Bharati University. Over to you, ma'am. It looks like Dr. Sharbari Sen is not present at the moment. We are trying to connect. Please be with us. Technical team, I would request you to help Dr. Sharbari Sen ma'am to connect to the session. We are waiting for her. Ma'am is here. Ma'am, please go on.
Yeah, I have entered.
Yes, ma'am. You are both audible and visible.
Okay, okay. So we'll start the session.
Yes,
No,
ma'am.
you will do
Please.
anything else.
No, no, no. I
Okay.
am done. Please continue. Ma'am, please start the technical session.
I'll do it. I'll start it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, 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 okay. So our today's session, I think we are 10 minutes before. We are supposed to start by 12:30. Anyway, it's always good to be on time. That is LGBTQ, the vulnerable group. And we have 4 speakers in this session. I'm just taking the name of the speakers. The first, Mohammad Liton Hussain, then Miss Anumita Das and Umakant Prasad, then Miss Preran Thakur, Miss Aditi Thakur, and Mr. Yash Singh Sisodia. I hope all the presenters are there. Right. So I think let us listen to the speakers first. Then we will talk on the subject. And for the LGBTQ, it is always being said that people in India remain closeted, fearing discrimination from their families who might see homosexuality as shameful. So they are the excluded group. We have rights for them. We are making provisions for them. We don't know how far we will have to move for looking them into a very visible position. So I'm inviting first speaker, Mohammad Liton Hussain, who is Associate Professor, University of Rajshahi, Bangladesh. And he will be speaking on the topic, government policy and implications in mainstreaming jobs for transgender hijra in Bangladesh. So we'll give you 10 minutes time, and we'll be happy if you complete your presentation within the time, and we will keep the question answer session later on. So you may start, then please.
Can you hear me, ma'am, clearly? Am I audible and visible, ma'am?
Yeah, you're visible, but your sound, I think, you'll have to be a bit loud.
Okay, wait. So is it okay right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving this opportunity. The honorable speakers of this session, the distinguished panelists, participants, and the invited speakers of this technical session. Very good noon, good afternoon, and good evening. I would like to thank the organizers of this international webinar conference of Rabindra Bharati University, especially the convener Dr. Payal Rai Chaudhuri from the Department of Human Rights and Human Development, and Mr. Sanjay Kumar Yadav from the Department of Disability Studies for organizing this conference. Okay, now I'm going to talk about my today's research topic, which is government policy implications, mainstreaming job for transgender Hijra in Bangladesh. Next slide, please. So in South Asia, already we know, transgender Hijra means transgender women are who are female psyche in male body, or neither men nor women. In Bangladesh, they are one of the most vulnerable groups in terms of all aspects. Their main occupations are Hijragiri, based in blazing like bird, and begging, sex working in boutiques, garments factory, restaurant, and parlors. But they cannot sustain their job long term due to their sexual assault, teaching, harassment, and from their feminine behavior or attitudes. So at the historical moment, it was a historical moment, the government has declared this organization 2014, 26 January as a Hijra sex or third gender. However, in the existing official documents of Ministry of Social Welfare, Hijra has been defined as Jono or Lingo Protibandhi, which implies they're sexually and genitally handicapped. Next slide, please. So after this recognition, the government took two kind of initiatives. One is life skill development program, another is the employment mainstreaming opportunity for government sectors. So in this regard, government took invited Hijra people to apply the formal low-level 14 jobs, and around 40 Hijra candidates applied for the job, and 12 had been finally job, but they did not get the job, which I will clear later in my presentation. Next slide, please. And so if we look at the protection mechanism of the legal instruments, the Constitution of Bangladesh clearly mentioned that Article 20, Section 1, works is a right, a duty, and a matter of honor for every citizen who is capable of working. And by this time, the government already ratified the ECOSOC rights and ICCPR. So as a duty bearer, the state has a sole responsibility to ensure its all citizens, including obviously the transgender women and people, employment rights. Next slide, please. So this paper, main purpose of this paper is to shed light on the implications of legal framework, especially policy instrument of the state in mainstreaming jobs for transgender Hijra in the government sector. This research is a qualitative approach by nature and based on the primary and secondary sources, purposive sampling, policy documentation review, key informant interview, case study had been employed for this research. Next slide, please. So to understand the to understand the existing employment policy status of Hijra, the strength, I have reviewed in two documents, two policy documents. Okay, I'm fine. So I have reviewed two policy documents under the Ministry of Labor and Employment and the Social Welfare Ministry. So if we look at the Ministry of Social Welfare, the implementation policy of Hijra Livelihood Development Project of Hijra 2019, there are 11 articles of implementation policy in the project. And the main mandate and the main focus of this policy on the accessibility of education, different training programs for skill program of Hijra people as a safety net. But there is no presence of employment rights issues of Hijra in the existing implementation policy of 2013. So if we look at the labor policy, the main mandate of this labor policy to ensure the labor and employment rights to mitigate and discrimination of workplace every citizen of Bangladesh. Even the policy also emphasis on the women's participation in the labor market. If we look at the Article 4, Section 3, the policy is committed to ensure the job opportunity and make sure the discrimination-free working environment for indigenous people, ethnic minorities, Dalits, and physically and mentally challenged, peripheral and vulnerable groups. But in the interior labor policy, there is no presence of Hijra employment inclusion here. So it was a very remarkable, and next one is the Hijra declaration. It was a very remarkable moment for this community, but and this community, the government officially published this group is a third gender and Hijra sex, but even there is no, it was a one-line sentence, and there is no kind of indication of how employment, how Hijra is mainstreaming in the government jobs. But if we look at the Ministry of Social Welfare, we can see besides this policy, there are some policies in the Ministry of, like National Disability Policy 1995, National Water Person Policy 2013, National Development Policy 2011, Children Acts 2001, Rights and Protection of Persons with Disability in 2000. But the government did not make any kind of Hijra employment policy in the formal sector after this recognition. Next slide, please. So, impact of this policy, we can see no employment policy for the Hijra people had been formulated and not recognized of Hijra identity in the legal documents. Just imagine when the government job circulation is published, only male and female category existed in the application form. So they are automatically excluded from the government employment, and no clarification regarding the formal employment of Hijra in the declaration. The next slide, please. So and if we look at and then the national instruments like Act, Policy and Law and ratified international instruments are not practicing for the promotion of Hijra employment. And the last one is the official statement, perception is very poor. The official perception very poor regarding the Hijra identity and transgenderism. I asked one of my policymakers of the Ministry of, under the Ministry of Social Welfare, I asked, what do you mean by Hijra and who are Hijra? He replied, basically those who are sexually and genitally handicapped are called Hijra. Normally I am a boy, but I would not belong to as a boy. I want to become a woman. Is it a normal phenomenon or thinking? Actually, this kind of thinking is not a normal and acceptable in mainstreaming society. Next slide, please. If we mention a case in 2014, already I have mentioned in my background session, in 2014, government published a circular, 14 low-level jobs, around 40 candidates applied and maintained all the procedures, and 12 candidates had been finally selected. But in the name of the medical examination, they had been excluded, and they had been harassed, encountered and discriminated lot of things. Even in the Viva board, in the total employment inclusion process, they had been violated, discriminated and harassed, and had been the human rights violation. And finally the medical team reported and published, they all are Hijra, they all are fraud Hijra, all are men. So it was a huge misunderstanding, and because the medical examination based on the materiality of the body, not on the basis of self-healing, self-determination, on sexual orientation, which is clearly identified in the Yogyakarta Principle, Article 3. So it was a huge misunderstanding, and finally the 12 Hijra candidates could not get their formal sector jobs. Rather, they had been stigmatized again in 2015. Next slide, please. So in the discussion part, I have noticed no employment policy for Hijra had been prepared for inclusion of these Hijra people. Existing policy had been constructed on the basis of the non-conforming gender identity, male-female category. Hijra recognition had not been reflected in the reality and practice in the legal documents, and the national and the international instruments are not effectively practiced for ensuring their employment rights of Hijra people. And no Hijra recognizing policy had been formulated after the recognition based on the Yogyakarta Principle, Article 3, or Delhi Supreme Court Declaration Bills, or Article 16 under ICCPR. Next slide, please. So this research is suggesting some recommendations, and the one is the consolidated employment policy of Hijra people should be addressed, and the existing policy should be amended. And the second one is the gender recognizing or identification policy of Hijra should be constructed based on the Yogyakarta Principle Article 3, which I already mentioned. What is the Yogyakarta Principle Article 3? On Article 16 of ICCPR, Indian Recognition Principles, and Nepal Hijra Recognition Bill. And the third one is the Hijra Recognition Declaration Gazette should be implemented in the legal documents as a distinct identity category on the NID national identity card, passport in the formal sector, and job circulation and the application form beside the male-female gender identity. For clear perception of Hijra identity, some sensitivity workshop and gender identity recognizing policy training should be arranged for the officials and the staffs who were working in the livelihood development project under the Ministry of Social Welfare. That's all. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Enlightened us about the condition of within 40 Hijras and the Bangladesh. And I think the listener, they've updated their knowledge about it. You have mentioned one thing that which is very, very important. If we talk about the empowerment, that life skill development program and job, this is extremely essential. And another thing you have mentioned, which is very also important, that is protection mechanism. Because till date we are considering them as an excluded group. And you have rightly mentioned that there must be a protection mechanism because we cannot ignore the term equality for them. And using the term Protibandhi or handicap, it's very degrading. So I say that which should, because in the extremely social level, basically they're handicapped. So whatever the policies and whatever the present condition need to be improved for the betterment of this community. Thank you, Mohammed Little Hussain. I missed one thing that I have not mentioned your department. So he is actually.
Ma'am, I am from the Department of Anthropology. Department of Anthropology.
Yeah, sorry for that.
No, it's okay, ma'am. Just one thing I would like to just one line, just one, if you just permit me.
Thank you very much for your very nice presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
So our next speaker, Ms. Orumita Dash and Umakant Prasad, research scholar and assistant professor, Vishwabharati. The topic, the truth of nature and transgender rights.
Yes, ma'am. Presentation, please.
You will be presenting.
Already I have sent that presentation. That's right. Okay, fine. Good morning. Sorry, now it is good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, ma'am, for introducing me in the international platform. My title is The Truth of Nature and Transgender Rights. Why I have named the paper that The Truth of Nature, that I will explain at last. First of all, I want to say something before starting my presentation, that why I have taken this topic for the paper, because I was updated about each and every step of COVID-19 in social media, basically because we all are updated in by social media. There we have seen that social media displayed us that how different political parties, well-known individuals, and even the common people also distributed cereals, sanitizers, and the basic need to the poor section of the country. But I personally have seen that no one have given anything, any help to the transgender person. And there we have seen also that who are taking the cereals, sanitizers, and basic needs, they are basically male or a female. No one was even bothered of the fact that there is a presence of one additional gender too. Maybe the cereal, sanitizers, and the basic daily needs reach to them, okay, but this picture never displayed by social media, because the hypocrisy of our society. We are thinking that if we will upload it in our society, in our social media, it will decrease our picture. So that's why I thought that time that I should make a survey for them. Next slide, please. That is my introduction. In the beginning of the history, there was no human rights described as such, only a presence of natural law theory, that is, right of life, liberty, and property. Afterward, in the time of Second World War, then the human rights include in our society. And when the time flies and the human rights are include in our society very tightly, and they're with us every time. But we made the human rights in our constitution. Beside this, we have there are certain bills which include special need and characteristics, being TG bill, the Transgender Person Protection of Rights Act 2019. And that bill have the 6 parts, and those are part one. You can see here: protection of rights, prohibition against discrimination, recognition of identity of transgender person, welfare measures by government, obligation of establishment and other persons, education, social security, and health of transgender person. Next one is National Council for Transgender Person, and last one is offences and penalties. Next slide. Now we should know some keywords about the transgender. That is, we know the terms. We all aware that LGBTQ, drag queen, enanche, crossdresser, and heterosexual. And transgender defines those individuals whose behavior and psychology are completely different to what they are by birth. Their real of life and the real picture are opposite. Next slide. This one is my delimitation of my study. The study has been conducted only with Enanche. The study has been done in Pushtin Bardhaman. Next slide. Those that 3 objectives I have taken for the study: to study the daily life activity of the transgender during COVID-19, to study the effect of COVID-19 in transgender, to study the difference between the situation between before COVID-19 and during COVID-19. Next. This is methodology. The present study is a descriptive survey research, and for that research, I have taken snowball sampling, and the data collection tool was self-made unstructured interview. Uh, I was the researcher, and I have taken the sample from the Iranj who are begging in the street of Bashpora road toll tax area. And first of all, I went there, and they were saying that they are doing their work, and they have given their phone numbers, and I talked to them, and afterward they called to their place, and there also I went, and I have taken the data from that portion. Next. This is analysis. I want to say that here, NS does not have the freedom to stay wherever they want. They have specific piece of land in the society where they can live. Every city has a single house where they are allowed to live. A very less amount is to be paid by them against that. Nearly 12 to 13 of them stay together under that small roof. Provided the fact that who is going to stay in which city, it is completely depends on them. Positive responses always been received when it came to the question regarding citizenship of India. They told me that they all have Aadhaar card and PAN card, voter card, all things they already have. And I asked them for the which sex they are mentioned there. They said that there are 3 categories of the sex. One is male, female, and another one is others. They are marking in the others. Sometimes they have already written their transgender. So so in our society, in our India, the citizenship of them is possible. Next. They are properly assigned to their place of work. Their daily wages come mostly from begging in street, train, of blessing newlyweds and newborns, of singing and performance along with typical claps that no one misses, dancing in marriage ceremony, and sometimes prostitution. But major part of their income nowadays comes from begging itself. Due to COVID-19, services is closed temporarily, which has decreased their income due due to social distancing, blessing newlyweds and newborns by singing and performance along with typical claps. It is also in on a pause. Prostitution also on a hold due to health issue. They never had expected this lockdown will get extended this long. When they realize they are left with limited amount of money, they prefer to revert back to their ancestor place. They experience different incidents in their home. At the time of returning, some preferred to dress like a man, whereas some as hide herself behind the darkness and lock themselves in a room. On the other hand, some of them also received greetings from their neighbors. Next. In this lockdown, people have received help from different places, but NRs were not counted into this list. They did not receive help much. On the other hand, they had acted as a supported for the society. They had collected funds among themselves, and they helped the needy people. If we compare the overall scenario, they were also equally affected by the pandemic. Their wages kept on declining. Begging had also got decreased. The number of vehicles crossing toll tags has also declined, which eventually their collection. Next. Uh, Here the result is that they have the freedom to go back to their house, stay with their parents with full security. They have PAN card, they have voter card, they have citizenship, but somewhere the other everything is incomplete. They have all things, but all are in an incomplete way. And the most important evidence is today also so some of them still prefer to hide their identity. So they have the identity crisis. Even some of them are locked in their house and are not allowed to interact with their society. They still rely on their traditional wages and not some other profession. And the main reason behind this being bullying, taunting, and discriminating. They are announced. That does not mean they are someone not to interact with, they are kind hearted. This fact got justified when we saw them helping other needy labor in spite of knowing they themselves have a shortage of food and money. This pandemic has again made their space in the society very crystal clear. No matter how harsh the condition gets, they will still remain the same in the society. And the pandemic has affected them both physically and mentally. Even if they are in their home along with their parents, they have to be someone else and bear someone else's identity. It means that whenever they are living in outside, they are with their identity. But whenever they are going back to their home, they are opposite, means that if they are behaving in the outer side of their home, they are like a woman. If they are going back to their home, they again become a man. So they have to leave their identity in the house, when eventually creates not only psychologically but also a mental conflict in them. Next. Sometimes this kind of conflict will bring the depression among them. Next slide. sorry, previous one. Okay, this one is my conclusion why I have taken this kind of title, that truth of nature, that when COVID 19 came into our society, they have not marked that they are male, we will affect that male person, we will affect our female persons. They are, that COVID 19 is a pathogen in the biological world, and they are affecting complete human beings. They are not discriminating like man, female, male, female, or transgender. They are completely affect our human society. So transgender also can be the part of a victimized of the by the COVID 19. That's why I have told that the truth of the nature. So nature also accepting that transgender person as a human, but we people of the society, we are not expecting accepting them as a human. The TA bill 2019 also passed, and they have some characteristics, special characteristics, special need which transgenders are need. So even today, most of the transgender person are marginalized, discriminated, bullied, deprived, and also most of our society is not ready to accept them. Thank you.
Thanks to you and Dr. Uma Shanti also for your presentation. It's very, very interesting. And a special thanks to you because you have taken into account the special group in this COVID 19. Because we are discussing so many things, but it's really very great of you that you have taken them into account in this pandemic situation. Another thing you have mentioned, which I like very much, that citizenship is possible. Very rightly said that citizenship is possible, but we don't know what is happening after that. As you mentioned that their livelihood is mostly dependent on that baby, and when this during this lockdown period, we have never inquired that how they found their life in what a difficult situation. This is not mentioned rightly, and as we have said that in this whatever help we are being supplied, but this UNAC they were not included. We are keeping them apart from our mentioning it. Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker, Ms. Prerna Talwar. Sorry for the mistake, Prerna. Prerna ji, I'm very sorry for the mistake. I can say that our next speaker is Ms. Prerna Talwar, student at Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology. The topic is homophobia, a problem, not a phobia. Is she there? Prerna Talwar.
Yes, ma'am. A very good afternoon to everyone present here. And I would like to extend a warm welcome. And can I please share my screen? My topic for today is homophobia, a problem, not a phobia. LGBTQ is an initialism that stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. It is intended to emphasize a diversity of sexuality. It may be used to refer to anyone who is non heterosexual or non cisgender. LGBTQ plus encompasses a spectrum of gender and sexuality. Did you know LGBTQ community is 1.5 times more likely to have a social anxiety or depression than their heterosexual counterparts? 21% of LGBTQ students say bullying is biggest problem at school. 51% of LGBTQ employees are not out at work. 40% of homeless teens are a part of the LGBTQ community. 25% of the LGBTQ teens are rejected by their own family. 22% of LGBTQ members living in nursing homes feel they can be open about their gender identity with staff. There are nearly 4.9 lakh transgenders in India, according to the 2011 census. According to global studies, 2 to 13% of the population exhibits same sex preference. In India, there would be at least 1.2 crore homosexuals, which is 1% of the population. Types of discrimination that plagues the LGBTQ community. Discrimination against the LGBTQ community includes, but is not limited to, abuse, be it physical and verbal, exclusion from social or professional events or activities, ignoring claims of LGBTQ members regarding physical or mental abuse, unfair treatment in the workplace by employers and co workers, indirect abuse such as graffiti or gossip. They are subjected to discriminations on the basis of their orientation, which is unacceptable. They are constantly at the risk of persecution. They are too often the victims of hate crimes as well. Transgenders are rejected by their parents and are left homeless. The mental health challenges in the LGBTQ community. People in the LGBTQ community experience mental health issues at higher rates. A recent study found 61% have depression, 45% have PTSD, and 36% have an anxiety disorder. Additionally, 40% of transgender individuals have attempted suicide in their lifetime. This is nearly 9 times the overall rate in United States. In 2015, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration's National Survey on Drug Use and Health, NSDUH, found that 1 in 3 LGBTQ adults experienced mental illness in 2015 compared with only 1 in 5 heterosexual adults. Even among adults with mental illness, LGBTQ adults may experience more serious symptoms. Among the LGBTQ adults living with mental illness, 13% have a serious mental illness that substantially interfered with major life activities. The same was true for only 4% of heterosexual adults living with the mental illness. The NSDUH found that 15% of the LGBTQ adults had an alcohol or drug use disorder in the past year, compared to 8% of the heterosexual adults. They are subjected to harassments and bullying in schools. In addition to homophobia, LGBTQ people confront racism and poverty on a daily basis. LGBTQ people are more likely to use alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs than the general population, reports higher rate of substance abuse problems, and are more likely to continue heavy drinking into their later life. LGBTQ elders mostly have no one to look after them as they cannot adopt children. Because of various problems, people of the LGBTQ community are mentally and psychologically affected at drastic rates. Legal rights of the LGBTQ community in India. The human rights of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people, LGBTI, are coming into sharper focus around the world, with important advances in many countries in recent years, including the adoption of the new legal protections. In April 2014, the Supreme Court of India ruled in the Nalsa versus Union of India that the rights and the freedoms of the transgender people in India were protected under the Constitution. On 6 September 2018, the Supreme Court issued its verdict. The court unanimously ruled that Section 377 is unconstitutional as it is infringed on the fundamental rights of the autonomy, intimacy, and identity, thus legalizing homosexuality in India. The court explicitly overturned its 2013 judgment. These judgments are considered a landmark both in terms of their expansive reading of constitutional rights and in empowering LGBT persons. This was a welcome victory, but it does not necessarily mean that the LGBT people in India are fully free or perceived as equal among their fellow citizens. It underscores how much work remains to be done in India and the rest of the world to overturn the antiquated and the repressive anti gay laws. Now we will focus on the rights they need. Government recognition of the same-sex relationship, such as through same-sex marriage or similar unions, allowing the LGBTQ adoption, recognition of the LGBTQ parenting, anti-bullying legislation, and student non-discrimination laws to protect the LGBTQ children and students, immigration equality laws, anti-discrimination laws for employment and housing, hate crime laws providing enhanced criminal penalties for prejudice motivated violence against LGBTQ people, equal age of consent laws, equal access to assisted reproductive technology, access to sex reassignment surgery and hormone replacement therapy, legal recognition and accommodation of the reassigned gender, laws related to the sexual orientation and the military service, allowing men to have sex with the men to donate blood. Steps to support our LGBT rights. Educate yourself on the LGBTQ population, not what you have learned from bathroom jokes, religious condemnations, or media stereotypes. If you do not have gay, lesbian, or transgender co-workers or acquaintances, read up about them or speak with friends or family members who know more than you do. You won't have to look very far. The difference lies on how we accept them and allow them to be a part of our community. Raise awareness among employees that June has been designated LGBTQ Pride Month by posting signs, sending memos, or making announcements at regularly scheduled meetings. Consider mentioning some of the activities that are happening locally, nationally, and worldwide. Be sensitive and respectful to all gender orientations and identities, and don't make assumptions. Speak out if a co worker uses offensive verbal comments, tells a disparaging joke about an LGBTQ person, or shows homophobia about another employee in your workplace. It's important to let the person know that such actions are inappropriate in a professional setting. Social media is a wonderful tool for building community, educating others, and uniting marginalized groups without support systems. But it also makes it easy for allies to speak on behalf of the LGBTQ community despite not having the same struggles. Establish a strong anti discrimination policy in your recruitment and promotion practices, and be sure all employees know what is not tolerated in the workplace, and in cases of homophobic bullying, promptly recognize the problem and take action. Establish a strong anti discrimination policy in your recruitment and promotion practices, and be sure all employees know what is not tolerated. Mentoring, employee networking groups, seminars, and conferences all go a long way in becoming a more inclusive place to work for LGBTQ employees. You can also support employees with measures such as climatic surveys, LGBTQ competency trainings, and employee resource groups, ERG. Some of the LGBT non-profits you can work with today, that is the GLSEN. The mission is to create safe and affirming schools for all, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. The Ali Forney Center. The mission is to protect LGBTQ youths from the harms of homelessness and empower them with tools needed to live independently. The Trevor Project. Mission is to provide crisis intervention and suicide prevention services to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, and questioning young people under 25. Immigration equality. The mission is to advocate for and represent lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, and HIV positive immigrants seeking safety, fair treatment, and freedom. The Sylvia Rivera Law Project mission is to work to guarantee that all people are free to self-determine their gender identity and expression regardless of income or race and without facing harassment, discrimination, or violence. The SAGE. The mission of SAGE is a national organization that offers supportive services and consumer resources to the LGBT, older people, and their caregivers. Welfare schemes for the transgenders. In a pioneering effort to solve the problems faced by the transgender people, the government of Tamil Nadu established a Transgender Welfare Board in April 2008. This effort is touted to be first in India and even in the world. Recently, Kochi Metro hired 23 transgender people in various departments, including housekeeping, ticket vending, and customer relations. A 6-member transgender welfare board has been set up by the Assam government, and the members from the state's transgender community have now been incorporated into the welfare board. This was confirmed by a state government notification issued on June 17 recently. Pride March. Pride parades, also known as the Pride Marches, Pride events, and Pride festivals, are events celebrating the LGBTQ culture and pride. The event also at times serves as demonstrations for the legal rights such as the same-sex marriage. Most Pride events occur annually and many take place around June to commemorate the 1969 Stonewall riots in New York City, a pivotal moment in modern LGBTQ social movements. First Gay Parade March in India took place in Kolkata. This is the Asia's first genderqueer pride parade at Madurai with Anjali Gopalan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prerna, for your information and brief presentation on LGBTQ. You have mentioned about very important thing about the census 2011 regarding the LGBTQ, the 4.9 lakh transgender in India. This is really a very huge number.
Ma'am, your microphone is not working correctly. Can you check if you are putting the finger there?
Is it okay now? Victoria, is it okay? Am I audible?
No, I can't hear.
Ma'am, your voice is coming very feeble.
Oh, then what to do? The volume is full.
Please place the upper volume button. I think the volume is low. No, ma'am, I can't hear you. You're mute.
No, now I'm muted.
Yeah.
Is it
You are
okay?
audible now. Yes, ma'am. Now it's audible clearly.
Now it's audible. Okay. So then again, my thanks to Ms. Prerna for your very informative presentation about LGBTQ community. And you mentioned about one thing that about the census of 2011, the presence number 4.9 lakh transgender in India. And that too, that is 2011. We don't know the number now, which is 2020. The next census is yet to come. And another important thing which you have mentioned about the mental health condition, that depression is a very big problem for them. I must mention another thing, that is as they cannot adopt, there is none to look after. And for this elderly transgender community, where the government do have any facilities for their proper living in the old age. You have mentioned about, I think, Kerala State's employment status, which they have taken a very good initiative for this livelihood of the transgender community. And another thing, that we count accessibility as one of the fundamental essential of life. And you have mentioned that their accessibility is very, very less. And I must mention that as the acceptance level is too low in the community, and so people are not thinking about their accessibility too. Thank you, Prerna. Thank you for your presentation. So our next speaker, thank you. Our next speaker, Aditi Thakur and Mr. Yash Singh Sisodia, student scholar, Ahilya Devi Vishwavidyalaya, Indore. The topic is a sociological study on awareness of human rights on LGBTQ. Who will be presenting? Aditi? Aditi, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Aditi. I hope everyone is safe in the corona pandemic. I'm just wanted to share my slide. so that I can present myself. So give me a minute. Just. So the title of my study will be is the sociological study on the awareness of human rights among LGBTQ. I start my presentation with the demographical shows that approximately there is 2.5 million LGBTQ people exist in India, and they are going through so much even after the independence of 73 years. I have here in a study in which LGBT person has shows that she was roaming in the park, and there was a lady and her child was there too. So the lady was telling her, socializing her child that don't do mischievous thing, that otherwise the transgender will kidnap you. So transgender go to them
Miss
and
Aditi
ask them.
Thakur,
Yes,
sorry
ma'am.
for interrupting, but please do share your screen properly. It's becoming too small to see. Do
Yeah.
zoom in.
Is it correct now?
It's better now. You can also
Yeah.
go to the slide share option, the slideshow option.
Give me a minute.
It's in the view under the view dialog box.
Give me a minute.
If you would like, your presentation can also be shared by our technical team. Would you like it?
Yeah, I can do
Victoria, please, can you present her presentation?
Hello, she didn't send it to me. I can't present it. Please go to the part view and press present.
Sorry, I can. You are not audible, Victoria.
Go to the view dialog box and then present.
If not, just maximize this and we continue. So because time is less,
Okay, you can also
we
just
shall
like
continue with this.
zoom in a bit, a little bit more.
Give me a minute. Is it fine now?
Yeah, it's better now. Yeah, you can continue.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so sorry about that. Really sorry.
Yeah.
So I should continue with the story I was telling you that a transgender met a girl and her mother, and the mother scold her daughter that don't do this mischievous thing, otherwise the transgender will kidnap you. So that transgender woman go to the mother and asked her daughter that I won't kidnap you, I will kidnap your mother, since she's teaching you the wrong thing and she's doing the wrong socialization. So in this way they are going with the name calling, and we are also uh, they are also go with the abusive language, and we haven't accept them as a part of the society. So with the next slide, the methodology for this presentation or for the research paper was an extensive and critical literature review with the Google Scholar and the other sources. We have studied three objectives on this study. First is to find the reason why inequality exists in Indian society for LGBTs, and to understand the physical, emotional, and psychological problem faced by LGBT community. To provide suggestion, recommendation on the basis of literature review. First, inequality of human rights among LGBTQ. As we have seen that they are facing physical, mental, and psychological violence rate, they in alarming rate. They managed to have get a proper performs less productivity at workplace due to the continuous discrimination, and some organizers did not hire them due to the improper documents. Then the physical, emotional, and psychological problems faced by them is emotional problem that they have loneliness, and they have rejection from their family and their loved ones and neighbor, and they go with the harassment and name calling and bullying. About 40 to 50% of LGBT population in India suffering from the mental health disorder. Suggestion and recommendation. First of all, we need an inspiring model for LGBT. Like we need an inspiring model from this community, so that family and friends get proud of them and inspire others to do such things, so that we will proud them too. And other thing, we need to develop feeling for them. Like I wish that I have a boy as a first child, and I have a girl as a first child. I won't ever wish like I have LGBT, yeah, a gay child as my first child, or a lesbian child as my first child. So we haven't developed any feelings for them, right, till now, as our own child. So we need a proper awareness through the television, social media, and marketing. And we can also use a counseling community in schools and uh, colleges. We need to make our children understand from the starting that there is another kind of gender which is as unique as you are. Then conclusion, that as a self-analysis, we haven't have any polar status for the relationship they are having. Like we have a polar status such as a brother and sister, husband and wife. Why a transgender person call his husband? Why there is not in a third status or third terminology for them? Why a lesbian has to call his wife a wife and another person also a wife? Why we don't have any third terminology for their relationship? Lastly, we need to ask ourselves, do we wish to have this population as our own child, as our own brother and sister? And to how can we allow our family, in our family, to a gay person to marry a gay person and start family with them? So we just need to ask ourselves, we need to ask, we need to aware our child to understand these things. And lastly, I just I wanted to thank you for the valuable time and patience. And for the further question, you can just email me on the ID provided to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Aditi Thakur and Mr. Yash Singh Sisodia for your beautiful topic about the sociological study and awareness of human rights. And it's very brief. You can, I think you should include more points here. You have missed many points, but you have scope to include more points, you know, that creating awareness on human rights, on LGBTQ, this is the need of the day. And your beautiful story, I really like it, that about the term socialization and giving, misinterpreting the thing, that they will kidnap them if they are doing any wrong thing. This is really a very nice story. And of course, if we show people some positive thing, then I think our mindset will be changed about the LGBTQ. And of course, in society, we have so many methods for creating awareness. And you know, through social media now, we are in a position to see a number of transgender in the screen, and that I really like. Yesterday I saw a big hoardings on them, and I really like it. And I was just thinking that today I must mention that I'm staying in Kolkata. I'm from Kolkata, so I just see that hoarding and the entry of Salt Lake to Newtown. That's a very important place, you know, the Newtown, the new township, and they have given us such a nice hoarding on about them. It is really very good. And very important thing you have mentioned, though your presentation is very brief, but you have given some important thing, that third terminology relationship. It's really time to think about it. Thank you. Thank you, Aditi. And yes, Singh Sisodia. Thank you so much. I think, okay, thank you so much. We have questions in the chat box, Pubali. Uh,
Yes, ma'am. I would request all the paper presenters to come on screen. There is a question,
yeah,
and which one of you would like to answer, you can answer. I'm reading the question
yes.
aloud. The question is asked by Khan Zahid. How can we assure dignity and equal opportunity of this section of society at social, local, and at family level, despite that we have constitutional provision for this section? Any one of you can answer. Who would like to answer it?
Okay.
Now,
Anybody?
I've opened the
Can
floor
you
to
hear me?
please.
Yeah, can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can hear you,
Yeah,
Mr.
yes,
Liton.
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
ma'am, if you just permit me, then I can try to answer the question by Khan Jahid.
Yes, sure, go
Yes,
ahead.
you're allowed.
Okay, thank you so much for giving this opportunity. I think Khan Jahid made a very crucial and very burning question. How can we assure dignity, equality of these people, of the society at social, local, and the family level? I think before going to understand their dignity, first of all, we have to understand there are some sort of very conceptual thing, like what is the difference between sex and gender, what is the difference between sex and sexuality, because we all are known sex and the sexuality is completely different. So it's a very theoretical question, right? And I think in when we were listening to the previous invited lecturers, Rachana, Madhura Bania, and Bashabi Chakraborty, I think they made it clear very properly, right? Sexuality is a kind of thing which is not on the materiality of the body, but what we are thinking in the perception from the perspectives of the society is basically addressed and categorized in the normative thinking. And what is the normative thinking? The binary thinking of the sex. So sex is a kind, would be and should be a homosexuality, heterosexuality. So it's a normal thinking and the normal phenomenon of the society. But what in the context of the homosexuality, the society cannot perceive it because of their social, I mean, the stigma, the doctrine of the religion, and so many things, and spiritual thinking. Okay, so I think that should be clear first. Sex and sexuality is totally different, and the from the state perspective, the state has a sole responsibility to make sure every citizens to their rights, the right to health, right to education, right to employment, and so many things. So, and for this perspective, the state had to make it clear, I mean, what is sex and what is sexuality. Because the LGBTQ and the queer group is totally based on, constructed not on the materiality of the body. And this is very clearly the Yogyakarta Principle. This is a very international instrument. I mean, the Yogyakarta Principles, Article 3 clearly mentioned, if I just read out, everyone has the right to recognition. Everyone has a person before the law, and person of diverse sexual orientation and gender identities shall enjoy legal capacity in all aspects of the society, of the life. So every each person's self-defined sexual orientation and gender identity is integral part of their personality and is one of the most basic aspects of self-determination. So, and dignity and freedom. So this is the question of the self-determination, self-identification. How can I just feel and how will I just explore myself and identify myself? This is a very crucial question, and I think this it should be. And the last one is there are lots of, I mean, the cultural and the social prejudice, and this kind of prejudice is injecting in the, you know, the conservative. Okay, that's just imagine if the society is a conservative society, a religious based, a theological society, this kind of dogmatic attitudes are prevailing is very strongly. So we cannot imagine beyond the category of the conforming gender identity like the male female conduct, we cannot imagine the non-conforming gender identity. So it's the kind of binary thinking. and the state has a sole responsibility, as well the mainstreaming people has a sole responsibility to uphold and to protect them through the lots of awareness, lots of seminars and talks. And this conference is a one kind of tools, and we are talking about this kind of thing to solve, I mean to make a different way out what should be addressed, and what should be give their rights. And I think Khan Jahid mentioned a very big, and even in the from the family perspectives, the parents and the family members have to understand this is how the gender and the transgenderism is just developing. So it's not the issue of the sex and the biological sex. This is the issue, and it's not a biological thing, it's a cultural and the self-identification thing. So I think I'm convinced or not, and this is from my part. Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody else would like to have a different perspective on the same question? Okay, thank you, Mr. Liton Hossain, for answering our questions. Now, we are almost at the end of our session today. Today, our session was quite short, but it was very informative. It was very enlightening. And I thank you, Dr. Sarvari Sen ma'am, for being with us as our chairperson today. We are very thankful that you gave us our time out of your busy schedule. I also thank to all of the paper presenters that have presented such good, informative and enlightening papers, the lecturers who had informed us with various knowledges that we were very much unaware of. And I would also like to thank the YouTube participants who had made us a part of their day, and they have been attending us for quite some few times. Now, tomorrow we will be having a panel on ethical and racial minorities with eminent speakers on this theme. Be with us tomorrow, sharp at 10:30 a.m. by your respective links. With this, I end our session today. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you so much, Pubali, and thank you so much, ma'am, for this international conference and organizing this session.
Thank you. Thank you, the team of Ravindra Bharati, the Department of Human Rights and Human Development, and Department of Disability Studies. I have seen my students here. They have worked really great to make the program a success. This LGBTQ terms, I must say that these terms and definitions is always changing and often means different things. But we must keep in our mind the dignity and the equality. And we should remove the discrimination, unfriendly attitude towards them, and instead of rejection, we must accept them. It is not only that we will have to work with the this laws or the legislation, but it should come from within our heart that we must change our mental state. I will not say acceptance, because that is a stagnation. But we must bring the theory into practice for the mainstreaming. Thank you. Thank you so much.